Good morning, my friends. How are you? So, I have been sitting here for 5 minutes. I know I was prepared 5 minutes early today. And I've been thinking about where to take this conversation. And a lot of this is going to depend on any messages that you put into the chat or the comments so that we can direct our thinking there. And the book I'm reading we're reading, hopefully, Tarana Burke and Brene Brown, which is You Are Your Best Thing. And if you see the back cover, it's a story of all of these people who are sharing their testimony. And that saying, let your test be your testimony. That's a little bit about what this story is about. And the second part of the subheading, I guess, is vulnerability, shame resilience, and the Black experience. And it's an anthology. So that's the book that we're reading. And part of the reason I'm reading this is because of the time that we're in and trying to get an appreciation for that. And my children this is a topic that's really important to them at this point in time. And so I wanna be there for them. But the second part is that in our industry, we are at a point where fair housing and protecting the protected classes and at home with diversity, which I've been instructing in and I'm teaching on Monday, is front and center in my mind as far as opening up my mind for education and for learning, right? And today is learning day. So those are the reasons why I think I've been digging into it. But before I go on that, I want to talk about some other things I'm digging into. And so again, there's a joke about like what's on your nightstand, and the idea being what books are you reading? And another place that I've been looking is and educating myself on is Alzheimer's research and the whole Alzheimer's disease. And that's a really vulnerable reading as well, because that as you listen to the stories and you hear the testimony, it's a very vulnerable place to be reading. And so, and listening, I've been listening to some books on tape and also a couple podcasts because I want to understand as best I can. And then the third part, of course, is wellness, and that being our whole well self and trying to understand more about my longevity, right? So all of those things kind of tie in. And I know all of us are similar in our situation on this. I'm also at a point in my life where, I really do care about what the next 5 or 10 years are going to look like. So I wanted to read, and it's in the comment section for you so that you can read it. But it comes from, so I gave you the quote, but I'm actually going to read it up a little forward, and so it talks about, and this is on page 125 of the book for those who have it, and it's talking, and the person who's writing this is Darren Young, and it's called Honoring Our Stories. And they talk about connections, and then it says, when we don't have healthy connections, we learn how to navigate the world in isolation, which isn't really living. And again, I think about the pandemic and our isolation, just merely functioning. Sometimes I talk about vulnerable things, but don't allow myself to feel vulnerable. So talking about vulnerability and being vulnerable are two different things. And I feel like this is something I need to call myself on frequently. If it's not connecting to me, if it's not connecting me to more of who I am, if it's not coming from this deep, vulnerable place in my heart, is it really a connection? And if it's coming from my head, or I have an agenda behind it, is it really connecting? All right, so I just gave you some of the whys on why I'm digging in. And is that so that I don't have to be vulnerable and just kind of have a reason, right? So here's the part I shared with you. Vulnerability is a state of showing up, unarmored, shaking, yet willing to embrace the benefit and consequence of human relationship. Sometimes feels counterintuitive as a Black person. Our collective internal protection mechanisms are transmitted strategies of survival that we inherited from our ancestors. However, vulnerability in the face of racism, trauma, challenges our operating systems of oppression. It illuminates the sheer power of our presence, the truth of our existence as equitable partners in humanity. So, so equitable versus equality is a big part of At Home with Diversity. So here's what I actually gave you for words. When I'm being vulnerable with myself about all my life experiences, I remember why I had to armor up in the first place. By honoring my pain, I can take inventory and decide which of these methods of protection I need in this moment and which I can leave behind. So the idea being there of what armor do we no longer need? What armor no longer serves us? What can we let go of? I have more choices and more liberations around how I show up with other people. So the idea on that, to me, and how I read that, and again, bringing it back to where I am right now in my world, is when you're feeling vulnerable, where, why, how, go through all of the W's and think about like your experiences into why we're here in the first place. And for me, one thing that I want to do is be able to be vulnerable without paranoid. And I want to be able to be open and vulnerable without defensiveness. And I also want to be open and vulnerable, even at the expense of potential less business, or that person not liking me, or being the person that, kind of is like the oddball in the crew, right? And I'll give you one last example of this. I was driving my kids up to Boston. They all went to Nashville for the weekend. So it was my two daughters, my son and his girlfriend in the car. And they started picking on each other a little. And again, back to Brene Brown, who's the author of this book, she talks about one of the dangers as parents that we do to our kids is let them pick on each other, because they know their vulnerabilities, they know their triggers, they know what happened and why they're whatever it is, right? So, and again, this is not my children, but this is the example. I think Brene Brown goes, like, again, they know where the skeletons are buried. They know who had a bedwetting issue. They know who had, whatever. So they can pull on that spot, and they started picking on each other. And again, it was said in joking, like the jokey picking on, which of course is under the defense mechanism of joking, I'm just joking, but it really is. I said, I don't think that even in a joke that when you're picked on, it feels good. And so I have said this to them for many, many years, like joking and picking on people is just plain a coward's way of picking on people, and they're all like, Mom's so, she's the fun sponge, And so one of the daughters took my role in this and said, you know what, it can be hurtful when we joke like that. Maybe we shouldn't, and it got me back to that vulnerability, like telling someone like, when you're joking, but it's hurtful. And maybe you want to make sure you understand where your motives are in that joking. And, they're like, come on, it's funny. People laughed. I'm like, but at the expense of someone. Anyway, I knew that I would be on a ramble today, and I didn't know where it was going to go. I did not think it was going to go to picking on people. What I want to offer is vulnerability is hard, and understanding vulnerability and knowing that we don't have the answers is really important. And the second part about this, and this is the part that I have just so been awakened to in this book, is how vulnerability brings us into a shame cycle. And really being careful and open with yourself about why you go in shame and what you can do about it, right? I have a friend who said that this is the year of her falling in love with herself. So she wants to treat herself like she's in love with herself, which means all of that negative self-talk, she's going to put a pause on it, right? If we wouldn't say it to a friend, and if we wouldn't have ourselves, that inner self, as a friend, then we need to work on that friendship with ourselves. And hopefully by doing that, we can then be open, I don't know, for more, right? And that isolation can be at bay, and we can make healthy choices on moving forward. And ultimately, we can be our own best thing. Anyway, all righty, my friends, I hope you have an amazing day and weekend. I'll be back on Monday with all sorts of new nuggets for us to think about, right? Obviously, I have no answers. All right, take care.